Hey everybody, it's Mike Jeffers, ChicagoJazz.com, episode 92 of Jazz This Week from Johnny O's here in Bridgeport. We've got Keith Baumann, Mark Sonksen, the founders of the Main Stem Orchestra. They have a concert coming up February 18th for the Illiana Jazz Society, so we're going to hear about that, plus my 3 picks of the week, so stay tuned. All right, everybody, we are back here live at Johnny O's right here in Bridgeport, 35th and Morgan Street. Hot dogs, fries, beers. Keith, Mark from the Main Stem Orchestra. Guys, I ask everyone this question. Have you ever been to a hot dog stand and talked about jazz on camera with me?
No.
I swear I never have.
That's a trick question. Of course you haven't, because you haven't been on the show yet. But have you ever hung out at a hot dog stand in Bridgeport?
No, I have not.
No, see?
Not
This is
in
kind of a hip joint, isn't it?
It's
I
great.
should get out more often.
You should. You should. This is a very retro spot, kind of a chill place. And it's retro, and I like the retro aspect of it because we're talking about the Main Stem Orchestra, which you guys founded together. You have a show coming up February 18th at the Glendora House in Chicago Ridge, and that's part of the Illiana Jazz Society's monthly jazz series that they have there on Sunday afternoons, 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. We're going to get more into that. But why don't we get, since there's 2 of you, we're going to bounce back and forth a little bit. Mark, why don't we start with you? Can you give the viewers maybe the 1 or 2 minute version of how you started performing, how you picked up the bass, and how you came to Chicago, because you're not originally from Chicago.
No, I am not. I started playing bass when I was 16, I believe. I learned how to play trumpet originally. I grew up in western Iowa.
Okay.
The public schools have excellent music programs. I started playing trumpet, and then I got braces, and I started playing trombone and valve trombone, and then the ultimate nerd instrument, the euphonium. But I could read bass clef, and they needed a bass player in the small town jazz band, in the school jazz band.
So can I ask you a question right
Yes.
there? Are you basically blaming the fact that you play bass on your dentist who put braces on your teeth?
Yes.
Okay.
Genetics.
I just wanted to clarify that. Okay.
Genetics is why I play the bass. My high school band director asked if I wanted to play in the next year, which would have been my sophomore or junior year, if I wanted to play bass in the jazz band. And I was like, well, of course.
Yeah.
He gave me an electric bass, and I promptly went home and didn't learn a damn thing over summer. I played along with pop records, and I never learned. It took me a long time to associate the notes on the fretboard with the notes on the clef, even though I could read bass clef and play piano and a horn.
So how did you end up practicing and playing? Were you playing by ear with all of these rock albums throughout the summer and stuff?
Yeah, I remember I was good at faking things, playing by ear. And I remember we played a Count Basie arrangement of an old tune called Jada.
Oh,
It
yeah?
was, I think the LP was vinyl LPs. It was.
They're coming back. They're coming
They are.
back.
I think it was called Black Orc. No, that's a Sammy Nesico. It was a recording of Jada by Count Basie, and I listened to it a couple, 2 or 3 times, and I was like, oh, cool. I see where the bass line's going. So I followed along, and that was kind of what forced me into figuring things out.
Ah, okay.
Plus, they had a couple of upright basses. God knows why in a small town of 1,500 people, but they were old K basses from the 50s. And at that time, this is in the early 1980s, I was probably one of the first high school kids in a jazz band to actually play an upright bass.
Oh, okay.
There wasn't a lot of that happening.
It was electric, right?
It was electric at the time.
Yeah.
I initially went to school to be a music major, had some changes of heart regarding profession, ended up doing a bachelor's degree in Spanish, which I'm thankful for. I have near native fluency in Spanish, and I've always been a musician. I've always played. There's never been a question about what I was going to do as a profession or play music.
Did you end up coming to Chicago?
I moved to Chicago in 1994, in August of 94. The initial contact with a Chicagoan was John Bainey.
Of course.
Always is.
Every bass player, it all leads through John Bainey.
I think in 86, it was Bonnie Kolek playing a Pops concert with the Waterloo Cedar Falls Symphony Orchestra, which I was playing in as a young college student at the time.
Okay.
And her trio at the time was Phil Grateau, John Bainey, and Howard Levy on piano. So I got to know John through the concert, and also for some reason his bass amp wasn't working, and I had the same Polytone bass amp. Everybody in the bass section pointed at me and said, "He's a jazz player."
He's got it, man.
So, and I happened, this is Waterloo, Iowa, and nobody steals anything. So I had my bass amp in my car, and I went out and got that, and everything was hunky-dory, and they invited me to come hang out with the band, and I'm like, wow, real jazz musicians. So that was my first connection with Chicago, and I ended up coming to Chicago once or twice a year and hanging out with the Bainies. He'd give
And Bainey suggested you came to Chicago then, huh?
Yeah. John had suggested that, in his Bainey-esque way. He said, "Hey, man, you should come to Chicago." I did a series of road gigs and things for several years after meeting him, and then finally I ended up moving here in 1994.
Okay.
And I've been here ever since. And ironically, I moved here thinking, okay, I'll hang out for 6 months or a year until I can figure out what other road gig I'm going to do. And, here I am, married with a 7.5-year-old daughter 24 years later.
And you have a bass instrument repairer?
I am a bass specialist. I'm a luthier. It's somebody who works on string instruments. I specialize in working on double basses. So
And what's the name of that company?
Sonksen Strings.
Sonksenstrings.com.
Yes.
That's awesome. Now, Keith,
Yeah.
you came up from Nashville, but
Well,
you must have started playing before that, and you must be from other
Actually,
places.
I'm from New York,
Okay. All right.
but I'm a big country music guy.
Okay.
Really. Born in New York City, lived 10 years in the Bay Area, California, and then came to Chicago. So, but I have connections with Nashville because the instruments that I play. I come up completely on the other side of the hill. Mark and I are like, we both climbed the hill from opposite ends, and we met at the top. Because I'm from bluegrass music.
Okay.
The sound I heard was bluegrass music, and that's what got me to be a professional musician. That sound, that I want to do that, whatever that is. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to find anybody in New York that does that.
Yeah.
But that's what I want to do. So I got into playing banjo, playing mandolin. Guitar came later for me. Actually, guitar came as I got to make a living at this. Everybody's like, learn to play the guitar.
Right.
You can get some gigs on mandolin and banjo, but you want to make a living, play the guitar.
Yeah.
So I started playing guitar. That love for bluegrass music, and if you follow the history of music, bluegrass has a pulse to it, a really strong pulse, acoustic pulse to it. And that, any music that had that attracted me. So, I heard it in traditional jazz, which is how I got into playing 4-string banjo. I heard that same pulse. And I heard it in swing music. I heard it with Django first. Django's music, which really, for a bluegrass guy, that music, that's a lot of people's first entrance from bluegrass to jazz is Django.
So how did you make that transfer? Was it a tough transition, like playing bluegrass, playing banjo, playing mandolin, and then getting into the swing side of it?
What was tough was the sensibility of it is exactly the same. In fact, if you follow the history of bluegrass, the whole format of a bluegrass band is based on a jazz band.
Okay.
Because string band music was kind of an ensemble thing back then. Everybody would play together, play the melody together. That thing of getting up and taking a solo and improvising that bluegrass musicians do one instrument at a time, Bill Monroe took that right off of a jazz band.
Okay.
And he's quoted as saying that. I liked the way they would play the melody and each fellow would get up and do his thing.
Okay.
So that whole format of soloing and improvising and the whole virtuosity thing, that all comes from jazz.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're very closely connected. I never realized that, but I did know that jazz attracted me.
Yeah.
Coming out of bluegrass, and it was part of that feeling. So that got me into that music. The hard part of the transition was, as a bluegrass musician, I had great ears, but I knew nothing about theory.
There's a lot more changes in jazz.
And I realized I could fake my way through this stuff because I had good ears, but that wasn't going to cut it for long.
Right.
So I did take some jazz guitar training, and then the rest of it was self-taught. But I realized I had to get somewhat educated. as a musician because I have to know what's going on here.
And then you started getting into jazz in Chicago, and that's kind of how we were talking before we came on camera about that swing craze back in the 90s and all that stuff.
I already had a strong interest in jazz, and I was kind of pursuing it. In San Francisco, people had played Western swing, which really, learning those standards. I didn't know that they were jazz standards. I was just playing Western swing Bob Wills stuff, and I found out that those happened to be jazz standards from the 20s and early 30s.
Okay, yeah.
So I learned a repertoire of that stuff, and then when I came here, I'm like, okay, I can play bluegrass. I stopped touring with the bluegrass band. I needed to make money. Quite frankly, the jazz thing, they seem like those guys got paid better. It's like, and everybody's like, learn to play guitar. There is a hierarchy there. Learn to play guitar, learn to read.
Yeah.
And you'll work, which is what I did. Learn to read chord charts and learn to read lead sheets, all that stuff, and play guitar because that you'll get a lot more calls if people can.
Sure, yeah.
And that's what I did, and that's kind of what got me into the whole playing jazz thing. And that era of the 20s through the late 30s is my favorite.
And that's why leading into the Main Stem Orchestra. So the two of you got to know each other, I'm assuming, on the jazz scene.
Yes.
Here and there, playing
Yes.
different gigs.
We played other bands together.
Yeah. So, and I know Mark and I have talked about this a little bit in the past, but you guys felt like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you guys feel like there was that niche area for this style of music to be played a certain way so that you could really dial in and zone in on this era of music?
Right.
There really isn't that many bands doing this era of music.
Well, there are bands that do this era of music, but they don't do the full-on acoustic thing.
Okay.
It's like searching for authenticity in every possible way when you're playing these tunes.
So now tell me a little bit about the Glendora House and the Illiana Jazz Society. It's a great organization. They've been around for many, many years, and I've worked with them through Chicago Jazz Magazine. They have a monthly concert series which happens once a month, 2 p.m. to 5 p.m., and you can get tickets at illianajazz.com, all the information there. Now, you guys are performing on February 18th. They have all of their concerts, by the way, at the Glendora House in Chicago Ridge. So what can people expect to hear? Now, there's a dance floor there, too, right?
Nice
so there's
dance
dancers
floor.
coming out.
Dancers get it. I believe it's 20 at the door, but 18 in advance. Students with ID get in for free. Dancers, if you tell them you're a swing dancer, you get in for $10.
Oh, wow.
So dancers, and it's a good dance floor.
Yeah.
That's a rare thing these days.
So now you guys are playing 3 hours, and is this going to be a specific era? It's just what you guys normally do.
Our
right?
our era is really 35 to. We can bill it as 35 to 45, but it's really, I'd say 35 to 40. Maybe 40
It's the height of the swing era.
So on February 18th,
Yes.
Glendora House, the Main Stem Orchestra, and so we'll send everybody over to mainstemorchestra.com, and of course on Facebook as well. We're going to link all that stuff up below. It's at the Glendora House. It's illianajazz.com. It's at 102nd and Harlem in Chicago Ridge. Of course, all the info is right there below. Guys, this has been fascinating. And I mean, it's like a whole other lost era that you guys are bringing back to the modern day. I know there's some bands that are doing things like this, but I mean, I'm really excited that you guys are actually doing this in Chicago. And I'm sure there's going to be more and more gigs coming up for you guys where people can come and see you. I know you guys have seen the show. Everybody is watching, has seen all my shows. I'm sure they watch them religiously, all 92 episodes now. So I have my 3 picks of the week, and I always do my disclaimer. And I know you guys know a couple of these groups that I'm going to mention here, so feel free to chime in. So we're going to move right into that, but I have to do my disclaimer, which of course, these are my 3 picks specifically that I think are going to be interesting to the casual music fan, the person that wants to go check out a new club, the person that is unsure of where to go this coming weekend. But by no means are these the only shows happening in Chicago. There is a ton of music happening in Chicago. I think you're going to be in Minnesota too. So there's tons of music happening in Minnesota as well, in one spot only, north of the Super Bowl.
Yeah, you betcha.
That's a whole other show. We'll talk to him when he gets back, if he ever does come back. But so you can get all the information at chicagojazz.com. But here's my 3 picks for this weekend. February 8th through the 11th at the Jazz Showcase. Let's go right over. The Jazz Showcase, February 8th through the 11th. Harry Allen, Scott Hamilton, Andy Brown Quartet. They are back in town. They killed it last year. They were super swinging. Joe Siegel, I know that when he put the group and brought the group in last year, he was incredibly complimentary after the gigs. He stayed for both sets each night, is what he told me. So this is going to be super swinging. So it's February 8th through the 11th, right there at the Jazz Showcase in the South Loop. All right, now if you want something totally grooving at the Green Mill, Friday and Saturday, February 9th and 10th, Mama Digdown's Brass Band is back at the Green Mill. That is completely smoking. It's totally grooving. This is completely different than what you guys do, but it's still fun. It's at the Green Mill right there in Uptown. Do not miss that. If you're looking for something fun, something that your friends who might not be a total jazz fan would dig, this is the place to go. Green Mill, February 9th and 10th, Mama Digdown's Brass Band. Last one, Winters Jazz Club, Thursday night. Bethany Pickens and her trio are going to be performing at Winters Jazz Club right there in Streeterville. Have you guys been to Winters Jazz Club?
Yes, I've played there.
Gorgeous spot.
It is. It's
It is a
great
gorgeous
place.
spot. Really a nice, intimate venue. Actually, that might be a place for you guys because it's very intimate. It's a good listening room.
It's the
Quiet.
same building
Has
that
been mentioned.
Dick's Last Resort used to be in.
It is. It
And
is.
I wondered when the first time I played there, I felt vaguely familiar in those surroundings. I'm like, why is this?
Except nobody's throwing.
Right, nobody's throwing napkins.
throwing things at me.
Great listening room. So
It is.
Bethany Pickens and her trio are going to be there February 8th, right there in Streeterville. All right, guys, I really appreciate you guys coming down. The information that actually we were talking about is incredibly fascinating to me, and I'm really glad that we were talking in depth about this era of music because I can remember, sort of studying it when I was at music school, but I mean, the fact that you guys are bringing this back in Chicago, and I feel like it's going to really just start moving and moving and moving as you guys continuously keep pushing this out. It's really fascinating. I'm glad you made it down here to Johnny O's to be on the show. And of course, I always end the show this way because all of us are playing out throughout the entire Chicagoland area. So I'm going to speak for all of us when I'm talking to you. If we do not see you somewhere this weekend, hopefully we will see you all somewhere out on the scene.
Right.